Thank you, Mr Speaker. Pleasure, Mr Speaker, and I welcome colleagues and I hope everyone's had a good summer's break. Mr Speaker, I thought most people were working very hard over the break on some matters, and I was wondering what lines of attack the opposition may bring into this new session, this new year of the Parliament, and I'm actually relieved to see actually there are no new lines whatsoever. I do note, Mr Speaker, that Mr Goff was obviously very busy working on his grand economic plan over the summer break. He took a month and a half or so to come up with a grand plan which would cap the salaries of 16 public servants, Mr Speaker. You know, very interesting when we got a budget, government budget of about $60 billion. Families are unemployed, as the other speakers have noticed, and the Leader of the Opposition can only come up with a plan for 16 public service. Having said that, in 2005, that same gentleman, the same member, signed off on a policy which would increase year-on-year CEO salaries by 5% per year for 5 years. 25%, sir, 5 times 5 before compounding, is the audacity to come out and with that unusual policy or headline grab, whatever he was earlier, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I unfortunately want to note my disappointment in the Honourable Shane Jones in his speech earlier. I do have good money on Mr Jones occupying one of those seats in the foreseeable future, Mr Speaker, but after that speech, which would probably fail Eco 101, I might have to cut that back on some of my investments, shall we say, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, it is a pleasure, and I congratulate the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, on today's statement. It's a pleasure to speak to this full program of reform, not only economic, but social reform, badly needed after 9 years of deterioration of the New Zealand social and economic scene. This is a template for a step up for New Zealand society, and that is why most of us are in this House, are in this Parliament, to make material, fundamental change and improvement for not only this current generations, but many generations to come, Mr Speaker, to put in place a step change. Mr Speaker, I want to re-quote from the conclusion of our Prime Minister's speech because these are just very, very good words. Mr Speaker, the policies that we intend to introduce this year will be a big part of the country's improvement this year, next year and into the future. The government's overriding concern is to improve opportunity, fairness, security for all New Zealanders. As the statement here has shown, we have an active and comprehensive program ahead of us in 2010 in almost every economic and social area. As a result, New Zealand will be a better place to live, a better place to work, a better place to invest, a better place to grow up and retire. There can be no greater result than that, Mr Speaker. They are very, very good words, and I proudly stand beside those words, Mr Speaker, and be working this year with a policy program to put them all in place, Mr Speaker. This puts in place the beginnings of a very ambitious plan for New Zealand to start to get us back into the economic global game, which New Zealand's been deteriorating down the lists for the last 9 years. It lays out what changes we must make to unleash the awesome potential of our awesome country. And this is exactly what New Zealand voted for on November the 8th, 2008. Mr Speaker, we would have liked to put in place these policies last year, but unfortunately we inherited a recession, an appalling state of Crown accounts, absolutely appalling, and the recession that we inherited, Mr Speaker, that Labor put New Zealand into in January 2008, 1 year before the rest of the globe. Mr Speaker, the tradable sector of New Zealand had been in recession since 2005. Mr Speaker, there's been a lot of discussion around tax. There are many facets and policies announced in here, but I just want to concentrate on some of those about tax. And I join the Honourable Mr Peter Dunn and congratulate him on his earlier speech in and around tax, things that are affecting our tax, impacting tax, and just where he was going, and I congratulate him again, and we are moving, the big wheel's moving to some alignment and bringing fairness back into our New Zealand tax system, Mr Speaker. I also want to reiterate our leaders' thanks and support for our support parties in government, ACT, Māori Party and United Future. Thank you. We are all on the same waka, looking towards and working for a much better and brighter future, Mr Speaker. I also congratulate the Tax Working Group for the way they laid out their options, Mr Speaker, and alternatives. And I want to note and reiterate again what's off the table, Mr Speaker. They provoked great discussion. But a capital gains tax, Mr Speaker, is off the table. A land tax is off the table. A risk-free rate of return method, Mr Speaker, is off the table. What's on the table, Mr Speaker? Mr Speaker, lower income tax rates are on the table for discussion. Possibly lower company tax rates are on the table for discussion. And obviously alignment of trust rates are on the table for discussion, Mr Speaker. And what's on the table is changes to the tax treatment of some residential investment properties, Mr Speaker. Changes to GST are being considered, that's right. But any changes we make in any part of the fiscal side will be fiscally neutral. The vast majority of New Zealanders will be better off and have a brighter future. It's bringing back fairness and equity after 9 long years of unfairness, jealousy and green-eyed tax policy from the previous administration, whose first job when they became government at 99 was actually to hike rates to 39 cents, the highest marginal tax rate, which other members have spoken about, which has caused so many problems, Mr Speaker. So where does Labor stand, Mr Speaker, from what we've heard today? Well, just a couple of things, Mr Speaker. Mr Cunliffe spoke earlier, and where does Mr Goff stand? What do Labor want? Because another speaker seems to talk about a larger state, a larger Crown account. That's translated to be a larger deficit and a larger borrowings, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I'm glad at least Mr Cunliffe has confirmed, and I think Mr Jones confirmed, that Labor want to tax your home. They want to have a capital gains tax and tax your residential home. Mr Speaker, on their blog, Mr Mallard, a previous Associate Finance Minister and Commerce, I think, Mr Speaker, or excuse me if that's not correct to Mr Mallard, but they want to hike rates to 36%. They want to hike rates. Old habits die hard. Their mouthpiece, their blog, they said they want tax rates to go to 36. They wanted company to go to 36, the 33, individual to go to 36, trust to go to 36, the 38 down to 36. That's what the Labor Party front bench member said, Mr Speaker, and yet it's pretty much been reconfirmed by their finance spokesman today, Mr Cunliffe, who just talks about the highest rate and nothing else. It's balanced, Mr Speaker. It is a balanced approach. I want to talk about GST, because Phil Goff says he's against it. In 1986, he voted for, he had to have, I think he was a minister, to take it from 0 to 10. His government, when he was in power, introduced it. In 89, in his government, when he was had more power, took it to 10 to 12 and a half. So he said, oh no, he wasn't for that increase way back then. What did he do when he was a minister, an associate finance minister, for the last 9 years, from 99 to 08? What did he do? Did he lower GST when the surpluses were in place? If you take his arguments against any increase in GST, turn them round. When New Zealand had a surplus, did they lower personal tax rates? No, they hiked them. Did they lower GST to talk about the pain, etc. they've been talking about? No, they did not, Mr Speaker. Where are they? They are all over the total show, Mr Speaker. The tax working group, Mr Speaker, says the tax system is broken. We know that. It's broken. It's been broken for quite some time. It started when Labor put their NV tax on in 99, drove Kiwis across the ditch, and actually they've hurt middle and lower income earners in New Zealand more than any other group, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I very much look forward to the next election when Labor has to campaign, and will campaign essentially on what they've said today, of an increase in income tax rates, an increase in company tax rates, because Mr Mallard, the front bench, have all confirmed and argued against what we're proposing today in this document. Therefore, the only place they can go is increasing your taxes, New Zealand, and quite probably a capital gains tax on your home. Well, that is off the table as far as this national government is concerned. Thank you, Mr Speaker.